He fought an extremely tight race. Now, embattled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu looks likely to form Israel's next government. But as the country appears to drift further to the extreme right, what sort of government might that be, and how will it impact both Israel and the region? This is Inside Story. Hello everyone, welcome to Inside Story. I'm Kamal Santamaria. There is no doubting Benjamin Netanyahu is a political survivor. The Israeli Prime Minister first took office way back in 1996, and now in Israel's 2019 election, he is once again in prime position to bring together a ruling coalition. Now, that is not to say Israel's elections weren't close. They definitely were. But in Israeli politics, it's all about partnerships. And the way Netanyahu positioned himself before the vote has meant finding support after it will be far easier for him and his Likud party. But what will it all mean for Israel and the wider region? Remember, Netanyahu promised a lot before the vote. Controversial plans, like annexing West Bank settlements. But don't forget, he's also been indicted on multiple counts of corruption, and the first hearings could happen within weeks. Here is how some Israelis felt about the election results.
I think I'm a bit naive because I thought there'll be a change here. A change for the better, a change for going forward towards peace, towards everything that is better, and I'm a bit scared.
I think Netanyahu is a great leader. Israel is a strong country. It's a wealth country, and I think it will be better now. I don't think that Gantz and Lapid have enough experience.
We're surrounded by right-wing radical people who want to annex more territories. In this part, we're never going to have peace. I'm terribly upset, terribly saddened, and it's the shock of my life. I was sure that this time we would win. Terrible.
You can't just come out of nowhere and become a prime minister. And Bibi has all the experience and big achievements. On his personal account, it remains to be seen what's going to happen with it.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's bring in our panel for today, starting in Brussels with Akiva Elder, who is a columnist for Al Monitor's Israel Pulse. In London, Yossi Mekelberg, the professor in international relations at Regent's University, specialises in Israeli politics. And rounding out the panel in West Jerusalem, Mitchell Barak is the CEO of Kivun Global Research, but was also an advisor to the former Israeli President Shimon Peres. So welcome to all three of you, gentlemen. My first question, it's a very simple one, and I might get just a quick view from each of you on this, is how did he do this? Benjamin Netanyahu. Benny Gantz was supposed to be a serious threat to him this time around, and in fact, even though it was close, Likud picked up 5 more seats than it did back in 2015. Akiva, let's start with you.
Well, Kamal, first of all, I think the reason is that Netanyahu is a magician. He can play at the same time the big hero, the master of not only Israel, but he can drive the whole world towards his side, and see who were the first to congratulate him. The radical right in Italy, Modi from India, and now even President Trump said that this is unbelievable, that this is good news for peace. So Netanyahu convinced the Israelis that he is the #1 diplomat, not only in Israel, not only in the Middle East, in the world. And it seems that if you look at the votes in the south near Gaza, he got a majority of the people who keep complaining that they have to run for shelters and the government is not protecting them, and yet he got the majority. So the message is that the Israelis are afraid of a change more than they are afraid of missiles.
Yossi Mekelberg, what do you reckon? Bibi the magician?
He's definitely a very skillful politician. He knows how to play his audiences in Israel. Not only he managed to regroup his base, but also increase his power. I think, in many ways, to echo what Akiva said just a minute ago, he plays between the victimhood and playing the statesman. He does almost to perfection, and he positioned himself to form a new government. In many cases, it's actually to see what happen next. But he can, in many ways, assemble around him the right in a way that the left, which almost decimated in this election, and pushing the entire agenda in a way that is convenient for him politically. And it's very difficult to argue with the result. He fought not only for his political survival, but also surviving out of a court case and probably of jail.
Mitchell Barak, I can't wait to hear what you've got to say, because you've been smiling and shaking your head there. Tell me what you think.
Well, I wouldn't call him a magician, although a lot of people do, because a magician means it's kind of a sleight of hand or an illusion. And there's nothing sleight of hand about what he does. He's very clear. The people who vote for him know exactly what they're voting for. I think the illusion really happens before the election. The media is creating it. Maybe the Attorney General in this case was creating it. And that's the kind of illusion that takes place. And Netanyahu comes and says, just like was said previously, he's not only the best diplomat and representative of Israel, he's one of the most skilled diplomats in the world, the most skilled leaders in the world. And I've said it in this studio. Very few leaders can say they have a great relationship with President Trump, and very few can say they have a great relationship with Vladimir Putin. He can say both. And a lot of people go for the whole geopolitical package and say, we want stability, we want a leader, we want someone that can keep the country moving forward, the economy and everything else. We're on the right track.
So it didn't matter then, Mitchell, to the electorate that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been indicted for corruption and the hearings could begin quite soon. I mean, from the outside looking in, it seemed like that should be a major factor in people's thinking.
Right. Well, first of all, he hasn't been indicted yet. The Attorney General recommends an indictment. He gets a pre-hearing. We're about a year away of possibly getting an indictment. But no, because what happened is it just emboldened the people's preconceived notion of him, meaning for the people that didn't like him and wanted him out and thought he's corrupt, this was just proof that the Attorney General has found corruption charges. For the people that believe he's not only a great leader, but he's being attacked unfairly by the media, that he's being attacked unfairly by the police, and what he says, that because the left can't change the government and overthrow him in the ballot box, they're doing it in the courtroom. So they believe that, and he was able to leverage that and use that. And that's what he successfully did. So it mattered to the people just to reassure them what they had felt already.
OK, gentlemen, let's talk about the potential coalition composition. Yossi, let me start with you. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu has the better chance of creating this, but it will be, forgive my phrasing here, very itty-bitty, won't it? A lot of smaller parties on which he will have to rely, and will be going, I suspect, even more right-wing.
Yes, and you see, the temptation, of course, if you want stability, this is the first time that the two biggest parties have more than half of the vote and more than, around 70. But this is most probably not going to happen. It means that he have to start coalition negotiation, the traditional horse trading with the small parties. They have no reason to make it easy for him. Though you might see the outcome, the end game of all of it, they know that he needs them more than ever, for both surviving in power and also to deal potentially with not being indicted. And I think the potential of being indicted probably much quicker than what was suggested is there. He might try to pass a legislation to stop it while he is in office. They understand the power that they have now, and they will joke for positions within the ministry that will serve their parties. Bear in mind, those parties are not catch-all parties, but more niche sector parties, and they will try to fight with each other and the Likud party for the best position. So it might take much longer than one expects.
You make the point, Yossi, that these two parties have more than half the vote. Is the idea of a blue and white, i.e. Benny Gantz, Likud coalition, is that completely out of the question, do you think? It's just the way the numbers stack up is interesting.
Well, the numbers suggest that it's tempting, but depends what you believe, what Benny Gantz said in public or what he said behind closed doors and being recorded, that he might do it. I think some of the blue and white are as right as members of the Likud. They come originally from there, and they might want to be part of the next government, but I think there will be a great resistance within the blue and white. It will be resistance also among the Likud party. So I think at the end of the day, it will go to the right. For the blue and white, because it's not a real party, it's an alliance, if they want to find any glue to stay together, staying in opposition and do it would be better than going into government.
Okay, and we'll talk more about the future of that party in a moment, and I'll be back with Akiva Elder shortly, but I do just want to have a little think about what Prime Minister Netanyahu stands for. What's the likely shape of his next term? Well, top of the list, or at least something Netanyahu often pushes to the top of the list, is Iran. He sees it as, of course, Israel's biggest threat, has called for much tougher sanctions against the Islamic Republic, which has actually meant a bit of a thawing of relations with some Arab countries. He's taken steps to minimise the chances of Palestinians ever having their own state. He even suggested his new government would annex illegal Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. All of this, of course, comes, as we've heard, under the renewed support from the United States. President Trump already recognised Jerusalem as Israel's capital and then included the occupied Golan Heights as Israeli territory just before the election. But on the flip side, as we've discussed, Netanyahu is fighting for political survival in the face of a series of corruption allegations against him. Akiva Elder in Brussels, all those things I mentioned there, things like the prospect of there not being a Palestinian state, the prospect of annexing settlements in the West Bank. Are these just things, do you think, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has said in the lead up to the election, or do you think these are the types of things he will follow through on?
Kamal, no matter what he said before the elections, and I just said that Netanyahu is a magician, but even Netanyahu is not able to find the magic touch, to have the magic touch and the magic formula, how to have the territories, how to eat the cake and still have a Jewish and democratic state. He doesn't have an answer to that. He wants to annex Area C, and he made some promises. Area C is 60% of the territories, and it's like cheese, it's like Swiss cheese. And I don't believe the international community, even if Trump will do it, the price that Israel will have to pay for it is tremendous. And Netanyahu will be dragged by his partners to do something that he doesn't want. What Netanyahu really wants is to sustain the status quo and sit back and watch how the Hamas and the Fatah are fighting. And actually, they are helping him because they keep telling the Israeli people that there is no partner. You see what's left of Oslo? 6 members of the Labour Party and 4 members of Meretz, and of course the Arab parties.
But you can understand, Akiva, you can understand why he might think that that will all still apply, that the status quo will still apply, because nothing's changed. Nothing's changed in the past 5 or 10 years, really. There is still no prospect of a Palestinian state. There is still the Hamas versus Israel conflict. There's all these things. Nothing's changing.
No, something is changing. There are more and more settlers coming. There is a creeping annexation, actually. And since it's creeping, people don't notice it. And it's not a big deal, of course, not for President Trump. And he may even recognize, like he did with East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, he may even recognize the annexation of Area C. But what about the 2.5 million Palestinians who live there? Netanyahu doesn't have any answer to that. And Trump doesn't have any answer to that. And what will happen to Abu Mazen now? Since Oslo is actually, what happened yesterday is the final burial of the Oslo Agreement. It has been more than 25 years since we signed it. Rabin is not with us, Arafat is not with us, and now the Labour Party, the followers of Yitzhak Rabin, have also faded away. So the Likud might be very happy with the results, but the people of Israel lost. And, you know, Shimon Peres said in '96, when he lost against Netanyahu, he said that the Jews won over the Israelis. And this is what's happening. And Netanyahu comes up as more Jewish and a greater patriot, but even, you know, he cannot bridge between the Jewish state and the democratic state and apartheid.
Mitchell Barak, let me come back to you in Jerusalem. Akiva Elder raised a really good point, which I wanted to discuss anyway, and he mentioned the Labour Party, the left wing, which has basically melted away. This is a really interesting thing for Israel's future, isn't it? I mean, the fact that there isn't a left wing, or there's not an active left wing in Israel anymore. It's completely changed.
Well, it sort of has. It's just been rebranded. And a lot of those left-wing voters went to blue and white. That became the let's defeat Netanyahu from the left or from the center party. And a lot of those votes went there. But I mean, I think Labor has a long-term stability because it's a party that's been around. It's a party with real members. It's a party with real branches. And it's a party that goes through primaries. I think they had a leadership crisis in that their newly elected leader did not have the confidence of a lot of the members and certainly not a lot of the voters. And he acted in a way which was not, conducive to getting votes. And so they have a horrible result. But in the long run, I think they may be able to pick themselves up. There is room for a left. As Yossi said, Blue and White is not a party, it's an alliance. It's an alliance of some very different ideologies, and the one thing they have in common is we don't like Bibi Netanyahu. So that's not going to stick so long, and now people are going to a lot of those people joined that party because they were already, dividing the spoils of winning the government and becoming ministers and deputy ministers and heads of committee. So right now, none of that is happening. So, some of those parties may break away, and I think that Netanyahu looks at Blue and White and Benny Gantz as a threat, as they are. 35 seats is very, very serious and very impressive, just like it is for Netanyahu. And again, those two parties can get together. Netanyahu will probably try somehow to break up that party, either to join his coalition in pieces or something, or maybe have some of those people break away, as was said. But that's a real threat, that party, and it's not a cohesive unit. So we'll have to see what does he do with that, and then where does it go.
Yossi, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. The Labour Party has a great tradition. This is the party that founded the country and led the Zionist movement even before. But it needs to regroup, and it needs not only to compete with Netanyahu in his own patch, of security, in terms of military power. Yes, he's stronger than them, but they need to introduce a real alternative. For too long, they don't do that. They hide what they really stand for. They're afraid to talk about two-state solution. They're afraid to talk about social justice. They need leadership. The leadership was this election disastrous. Yeah. And I think in this sense, the Blue and White is not an alternative. It's absolutely right that they, in many ways, sucked some of the support because voters looked at the Labour Party and said, this is not an alternative, this is not something that we can trust. What they need is to go back to the drawing board and see what a Labour Party, which in international terms is a social democratic party, where are the voters, what are the ideas that they can go and start working. I'll give you just one example. In the south of the country, which is one of the poorest, the Likud party is doing much well, though it's a Thatcherite-style party, than the Labour Party. This is inconceivable if the Labour Party wants to do any better.
Gentlemen, as we wind down the clock, I want to give you a scenario here, and it seems odd to be talking about this scenario given we've only just had an election, but this is a scenario of another election. Given that Israel often has early elections, given that Prime Minister Netanyahu could be indicted and there might have to be early elections anyway, how do you think it could pan out further? We've talked about the future of this Blue and White alliance. We've talked about the future, if there is a future, for the Labour Party. If there were to be a vote, Akiva, I'll start with you, in the next 12 months or so, what does this vote tell us about the next one, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I believe that these elections are a promo or a rehearsal before the next elections. And I keep asking myself, what would be the results if Netanyahu was not leading the Likud? There was someone else, Gideon Sa'ar or Katz or anyone from the top of the echelon of the Likud. Would we get the same results? Because it seems that the elections were a kind of a referendum, either you are for Bibi or against Bibi. It's either only Bibi or only not Bibi. These were the two slogans that were leading the campaigns. So what now will be the challenge of Gantz and Blue and White is to consolidate their platform and offer, as Yossi said before, they will have to form a coalition with the Labour Party, with Merz, and to find a way to the hearts of the Arab constituency that they have alienated. And next time to say, yes, we offer something else. It's not just, we promise you to remove Bibi because he's been there for too long and he's indicted.
Mitchell, sorry, Akiva, I'll interrupt you because I want to get final thoughts from Mitchell and Yossi as well. Mitchell, Likud without Prime Minister Netanyahu, how much of a different ballgame is it?
Well, we don't want to talk about the inheritance of the Likud while the leader is still alive and very well. I will say that, to talk about elections in 12 months, I think Netanyahu is fully aware that he's gotten a mandate to continue, and he has to make the strongest possible government, both to govern and in case he's indicted. And by the way, Israeli law is very clear. So a prime minister or minister who's indicted does not have to resign until convicted. And, we may see some surprises here because Netanyahu could say he can make a government with 65 and he'll get the recommendations to do that. And then he takes those recommendations and leverages it and says maybe to the Blue and White Party as a whole or maybe to pieces of it. And he takes some of those ultra-Orthodox parties and he tries to get a wider-based coalition, which is more along the lines of national unity. If you listen to what he said last night, I haven't heard him in a long time say, I'm the prime minister of everyone and I'm going to represent everyone. So he went from being very divisive over the campaign to even talking a little bit about unity. It is still unclear, but he's got the next month and a half to let everyone sweat it out to see what he really wants to do. And he's going to play all of the parties off of each other. And then he'll decide what he wants to do.
Yossi Mekelberg, Mitchell does make a good point there that there's no way Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to think about another election or the fact that he might not be there. And, yes, he does need to be indicted and a lot has to happen before we get to this scenario which I've given you. That said, I'm going to stay with this scenario. How do you see... Maybe tell us more about how you think the other parties can capitalise on it. As we made the point, Blue and White got 35 seats as well. That's a great springboard.
I think to continue the point, I think everyone will make everyone else sweating in the next few weeks, and they know what cards they have to play. But I think if Netanyahu is indicted, though he doesn't have to resign, this will be a real watershed in Israel politics that someone, as a prime minister, is indicted on some serious corruption allegation and won't resign. And I think maybe the actual challenge will come within the Likud party, because there are some people that are waiting to inherit him. He's still alive and well, but there are people that are waiting for a long time. Some candidates there, they are waiting to replace him. So I think if this happens, there might be a coup within the Likud, a democratic coup, of course, within the Likud party, and maybe some realignments between the Blue and White and the Likud party.
Mitchell, I can see you want to respond, but unfortunately the clock's beaten us again. But I do want to thank all three of you, Akiva Elder in Brussels, Yossi Mekelberg in London, and Mitchell Barak, who is joining us from West Jerusalem. Thank you to all three of you. And thank you for watching, of course. You can see this programme again. In fact, any of our previous editions of Inside Story, visit aljazeera.com and go to the programmes section for that. For further discussion, we're up on social media as well, our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. We are on Twitter as well, at AJ Inside Story. I'm at Kamal AJE if you want to tweet me directly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kamal Santamaria, and we will see you again soon.